Okay, so as I mentioned last class, tonight we're going to look at a few different ways of making an armature, which is basically a support for anything that we're sculpting. As I mentioned too, we're going to be looking at the mask, making masks. The mask is a really great vehicle for teaching students, sculpting skills and how to use various materials. And it's also a nice cross-curricular topic that you can contextualize with geography or cultural studies or anything like that. So the three different techniques we're going to look at I'm going to show you how to. They all result in using paper mache at the end, but their structures, the way they're putting together, are different from each other. The first one we're going to look at is just using something simple like straws. Okay, so we can, by cutting these and taping them together, we can create a general form. The other one we're going to look at is going to involve wire. This is just craft wire. It's really pliable. You can probably cut it with a pair of scissors. Yep. If not, you can always pick up a pair of wire cutters, and you can get these at the dollar store, and the ones there are good enough to cut this wire with. A lot of times when we're doing projects like this, because you don't get any money from the schools, I go and I'll buy a half a dozen or a dozen of these for a couple bucks a piece, and I'll just keep them in the room for the students. So, but yeah, you can get most of these types of wires, and they're very, very low gauge, and they're very soft wires, and they're used for crafts, and they're perfect for what we're doing. And then the last one I think is actually the easiest, and I think that it's probably the best one to do, and I would recommend it, is to find some form that is close to the form that you want for the mask that you might be doing. Mine's relatively rectangular. I just happen to have this, and it'll be good enough to demonstrate. But you can find something more oval or circular to use, and all we do is we use a little bit of Vaseline here, and we just to create a release. Any of you who did go to art school, I know some of you did here, in sculpting, you probably did something similar when you were doing any type of casting. So, but all the Vaseline does is it allows the whatever you're molding on top to separate from the plastic, so it doesn't adhere. It actually shouldn't to the plastic because it's plastic, but you never know, so it's always good to put a little bit of a release on it. Some of the other things, just plain white glue, stuff you can get, plain school glue, and water to make paper mache. And I always keep a few rolls of duct tape because this is fantastic for bonding pretty much anything. And also I use this to build up. If you're going to build up, like say a nose, for example, you can layer it, and then you can paper mache over top of it, for example. So I'll show you an example of that as well. And then just plain masking tape. So those are basically your tools. In terms of the skin, so what we ended up covering these armatures with, you can use traditional newspaper. But what I found is, and this is all over the schools, is the paper towels that they give you are the best thing for doing paper mache with, because they dry, and it's almost like cardboard when it dries, and it's really fantastic for doing paper mache with, right? So it's just these, and you cut them in strips just like you would do with the newspaper. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at is using the straws. And straws are pliable. You can bend them to create a shape. So like if we're going to do a circle or an oval, what I usually do is, if you take the scissors and you just create don't cut all the way through, but just enough to bend the straw, and you can do those in different places. Right, And then we're just slowly shaping it, right? So we can get it to the shape that we want it to go. And then what I do is then we take a little bit of tape. So I always use the duct tape. I take a few pieces. Put them in strips. And then we just start bonding them together. So the duct tape, if you do it lengthwise like this, make sure you know where your cut is. You can start to create that shape. So I know that I want to bend this a little bit more. So I'm going to make an incision here, an incision there, and I can start bending this. Now it's going to be difficult to get a perfect circle here, but that's okay. You know, we're creating the basic form right now, so I might put more cuts. Because then what we'll do is we'll and again, see, these are all materials that are not toxic, and they're easy to get, and they're not expensive, and you know, students can get their hands on them fairly easily, right? And you can as well if you have to go and purchase them yourself, so they're not going to break the bank here. So we kind of get a circle, okay? And then what you do is you make a supporting piece in the middle. So you know, what I do is I just measure out. I say, okay, fine, I'm going to go about right here. And then that piece is going to go in the middle. Now we're just going to continue to stitch it together. And you don't have to be super neat here, because remember, it's all going to be covered with paper mache. And we want to start thinking about how we're going to build that shape out, right? Because it's going to have a, and also you got to remember too here is that you can then, once that this is, once you have the basic form, you can build up your surfaces with the paper mache. So it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. So if we did the center, like so. So really with the armature, it's just basically a support. So it does not have to be absolutely perfect. It just needs to be enough, give you enough support that you can start to build a basic shape. So again, you don't have to be super neat. You know, when I get too sloppy where there's tape all over the place, but again, you don't have to be crazy finicky about it. So then with the last straw, that's when I start thinking about how I'm going to lift this up. To create the so you can kind of see how we're getting the basic shape of a mask, right? Now what I can do here as well with the duct tape, and this is the great thing about the duct tape, is I can then start to just kind of, actually on areas here, go right over top, create like a skin, and then I can actually take the piece of straw and just shape it in like that. And gives it all that extra support. I mean, you're going to paper mache over this in the end anyways, so it's okay. And we just tape on the inside a little bit, like so. So you're just building this up. Like, you're not gonna get a perfectly smooth, symmetrical mold from this, like you will say if you're, paper macheing over top of a shape like so. But at the same time, you can really, it's not as rigid as this, so you can, students can really manipulate the shape of the mask just by the way that they structure the straws. So I'll put this aside for a minute, and I'll show you how to do the wire one, and then we'll look at paper mache, okay? So with the wire, it's basically the same principle, except we're gonna hook it together. So with the wire, we can make a shape. We're gonna make this one a little bit smaller than the other one. So, we start off with a circle. It's going to basically denote the shape of the head. Oops. This is where you can use your pliers to want to do a couple twists just to hold it together. Like so. Then you can actually trim the edges off if you want. Don't go too far in because then it's going to come undone. Okay, so you got a basic circle shape. Now with the mask, because you're going to wear it, because it goes over your head, you don't have to have the three-dimensional form of the back of the head. You're really just worried about doing the front of the head. So this is where I would start to create the This wire is so soft that you can just do it with your hands. It's the nice thing about it. Don't worry if it's not super tight. Remember here, all we're doing is getting that concave shape of your face, right? We're not putting in any detail. That can all be done with paper mache after, and by clumping it up and kind of modeling it. So all we want to do here is get that basic shape of the face. So here at the center, what you need to do is you got to kind of do a twist. And then you can pull it tight. Nice thing is if this gets kind of out of whack a little bit, you can go in and shape it back to the way it was. Because the wire is pliable. So you look like right here, I didn't cut this long enough, but all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull this in and just give it one wrap. And then I can shape it with my hands now. So you can see I'm starting to get that, looks like a face, right? If you look at it from the profile. So this is probably, using the wire is probably the easiest way to kind of really start modeling in the shape of that face right away, if that's what you want to do. But it's not necessary. So, I mean, that would be a really good starting point for paper mache, right? So you have the forehead, right? The nose will be here, and then the whatever mouth kind of structure you'd use there. And then for a chin, you can actually build that out. What we do is we clump up, we take this paper, we soak it into the paper mache, we create clumps and we paste it on, and it dries, and then you can slowly build up the surface, right? Okay, so that's how you would do a wire one, all right? Again, don't get fixated on the actual facial features. All you're doing is creating a shape of the face with a fairly flat back, same way as we did here. Okay, that's all you really want to do. So the last one we don't have to do anything with. Okay, this is all we would do here with this to begin would be to use a little bit of Vaseline. Okay, you want to just cover all the plastic. Okay, so you have a nice even coating. So for the paper mache, I'm sure all of you have made paper mache before. White glue, water. When you're using these cardboard paper towels, I guess you could call them. What would you call those? Yeah, it's kind of a fibrous paper towel that and they do dry, and they're almost like cardboard. You know, you don't have to. You have a lot more. They're a lot more forgiving in terms of being able to shape them. So with the paper mache, the mixture, I always put more glue the better. That's my way I look at it. And then of course you just let it dissolve in the water, and eventually it dissolves completely. Yeah, it's pretty good. So you just take the paper towel, and we're going to cut them in strips. I always go long strips, even if when you lay them on top of your form, even if they're longer than your actual, the actual form that you're laying them over, it doesn't really matter because then you can just trim it after. So, soak it really good. Nice covered in. You want to squeeze out some of the water. Right? And then we just lay it over. And the paper mache will not stick to the plastic because of the oil in the Vaseline. So we should be able to just pull this right off when we're done. So if you can imagine this being oval, shape of a face, you can see how you would get a nice, very even form from this, right? Versus the other two methods. Now, you can cheat. You can go to Michael's and they sell already made paper mache faces, but that's great if the project is just, you know, you kids painting or something, but you don't really learn any sculpting skills by purchasing the ready-made ones. So this is good for elementary level because I know just from my experiences teaching in the high school that you inevitably get a sculpting project that has to do with paper mache. Sometimes we use plaster bandages, which are basically just like paper mache, except they're gauze bandages that are covered in plaster, and then you soak them in water, and then you get a plaster cast from them. They're more expensive. You got to buy them, and usually they're not always available. But you can do projects like that as well. So, yeah, sculpting usually involves, at least from what my experience is, paper mache forms. When you get into grade 12, for example, and students decide that they want to experiment more with sculpting, then you can kind of include different materials. But again, because of health and safety right now, there's a lot of stuff you can't do anymore. So, you know, there was one point where you could, you know, there was kilns in every classroom, and you could do pottery, and you could sculpt in clay and then fire them, and you know, there was you could do a lot of, you just do a lot of stuff that you can do now. So, but that doesn't mean you can't get creative with the materials that you can work with. And there's some really great sculpting projects and lesson ideas, and they're all over the internet. And I would encourage you to look, take a look there, and to use them as sources for ideas. They're really good. So I'm not going to do this whole thing, but I will, actually, you know what, I am going to do the whole thing. I'll do one layer here, that way I can pull it off, and then I can show you what it looks like. So I'll have to wait for it to dry till tomorrow, but when I post this tomorrow, in the future, I'll be able to show you what it looks like tomorrow. And glue over the counter here. So now you can wrap it a little bit. It's actually really nice stuff to work with. So a few more of these, and I think we'll be good. You can see how you can really rub it and shape it, and so you can imagine if you were building more layers on top of this, how you could really create some interesting forms. And like, I'll show you what I mean by bunching it up and that in order to create some of the facial features, right? So I went kind of large with that piece, but because of this material, you can actually really mold it really well. So like say you were going to do, you start to want to model in a chin, for example, here. So you would, what I would start to do at the bottom, I would just start, so you can't do this with the newspaper. But now I'm going to start building it in, right? So I'm starting to model it, and then I'll layer, right? So I'm starting to create some form there, all right? Say I wanted to do a nose on this guy here. I'm starting to build the bridge of the nose, right? And then I'm gonna take a piece of this, right? Start. So it's starting to get what looks like a face, you know? And then if I want to start building up around where the eyebrows are, right, I can then, so you can see how you can really start to model with this stuff. You always got to remember though to cover it with another, so don't just, I always cut like a, so you can really start to build up these contours and shapes. And yeah, it takes practice and patience, but so you can see how we can really start to build a face, right? Okay, so that's how you would work the paper mache on a form like this. For anything like this, for example, same process, but same process. So I would just dip this in paper, or sorry, the glue. Okay, I'm not going to do very much of this one, but I will show you basically what we're dealing with here. So it's a long piece, so we can actually, so because I've done with the tape there, I can just kind of start. So you can see how you can use the whoops, to start layering. It's okay, like if a piece hangs down like this, doesn't really matter because we're going to cover all that up anyways. I'll do a little bit more here. Right, so, and again, right, like it's not going to be as smooth and as even as the other one, but sometimes that's desirable, right? Sometimes that's okay. Sometimes we can use that to our advantage, right? Students can use that to suggest other forms and whatnot. So, you know, that's how you would cover that one. And then with the wire, it's pretty much the same thing, right? This one's much smaller, so we're gonna just do a couple pieces. I might be able to cover the whole face here, right? Right, so there you go, right? So we're just doing kind of the same thing. Not kind of, we're doing the exact same thing. And again, it's probably, we're gonna be building up. So, you know, there's an exercise in patience here as well. And again, it's okay if a piece hangs down like that, because you're never gonna see it. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna cut a longer strip. Remember, with the wire, you have less of a surface for the glue to attach to. You can see everything gets messy fairly quickly. So, and I like to, you can then wrap, and then you can pull it tight. And then, you know, maybe you have to just let this piece dry. And then you go back and when it dries, and then you apply some more. So those are basically your 3 techniques. Unfortunately, I wish we could do this in class so that I could kind of walk around and we could help each other, but we can't. So this is going to have to be how it is in terms of giving it a go on your own, all right? So what I'd like you to do is to pick one of the 3 ways of making the paper mache form. You can either try to build one out of straws or a little bit of wire, or if you want to take the other route and just use a bowl or some type of circular or oval object. A piece of Tupperware, cream cheese container, anything that's round, anything that you want to just practice building that form with. Okay. I would encourage you maybe even to try, pick 2 out of the 3, simply because doing, one of these, building them with straws or with wire and that, it's a different skill set than just paper macheing over a piece of plastic, for example. So it'll just give you a little bit more experience doing both. You don't have to paint these or anything. I would just show me that you understand how to build the armature and that you can cover it with paper mache. It can be small. You don't have to go super large, okay? Paper towel like this, I know this is the brown one, but if you were to use napkins from McDonald's or something, those are generally made of the same material. Okay, so any napkins from a restaurant or a fast food place would work as well, because they're heavier set and they're made with paper fibers. Okay, that's the word I was looking for before, not cardboard. It's paper. So basically, these are paper towels that are made with paper. So with out of trees, basically. So it's not. I guess newspapers are as well, but for some reason these just really mold really nicely. So anything like that would work, and yeah. So just give it a go and see what you can pull off. Okay. Check the. Well, anyways, I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you tomorrow as well. Well, I'll talk to you tomorrow as well, about when this is due and what I'm expecting, okay? All right, have a good night.